So in the state of Florida versus Wade Stephen Wilson, case number 19 CF 568, the court will read aloud the portion of the sentencing order related to the sentencing circumstances and proportionality. In evaluating the aggravating and mitigating factors, the court does not engage in a mere counting procedure, but instead makes a reasoned judgment based on the totality of the circumstances. In reaching this decision, the court is mindful that because death is a unique punishment in its finality, its application is reserved only for those cases where the most aggravating and least mitigating circumstances exist. The law never requires the imposition of a death sentence. In this case, the totality of the circumstances indicates the defendant, with premeditation, beat and strangled Christine Melton in her home before stealing her vehicle and driving to meet his girlfriend, Melissa Montanez. After Montanez refused to get into the car with him, the defendant battered her in broad daylight. The defendant told law enforcement, when Ms. Montanez managed to flee from the defendant, he fled the scene and drove back to Cape Coral, where he decided that he would murder another person. He saw Diane Ruiz walking to work and pulled over, pretending to ask for directions. She got into the car to provide directions, but the defendant strangled her when she tried to exit. He then drove to an empty lot, strangling her into unconsciousness at least one additional time on the way there. When she tried to flee from the car, he drove over her at least one time, inflicting mortal injuries to her spine, ribs, and neck. The evidence showed that both murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that the second murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated. The defendant inflicted serious physical and emotional pain to the victims. Moreover, the defendant committed the murders while on probation for prior felony convictions, and he committed 2 first-degree murders contemporaneously with each other and with grand theft of a motor vehicle, battery, and burglary of a dwelling. There were no statutory mitigating circumstances that were established, but the court considered the non-statutory mitigating circumstances presented by the defendant. Out of 13 enumerated non-statutory mitigating factors, the court found that 10 had been established. Out of those established, 6 were given little weight. The totality of the mitigating circumstances indicates that the defendant suffers from drug use from a young age, along with undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues of some kind. He felt abandoned by his biological parents, but had a devoted adoptive family who raised him in a supportive and loving environment. Defendant did not resist law enforcement when arrested and confessed fully to both murders. The court has further considered giving great weight to the advisory verdict of the jury, who recommended that the death penalty be imposed by a vote of 9-3 on count 1 for the murder of Christine Melton and a vote of 10-2 on count 4 for the murder of Diane Ruiz. The court recognizes that there is no mathematical formula for considering the aggravating and mitigating factors. It is not enough to weigh the number of aggravators against the number of mitigators. The court carefully considered the nature and quality of each aggravator and mitigator. Having reviewed all of the aggravating factors proven beyond a reasonable doubt and all of the mitigating circumstances reasonably established by the evidence, the court finds that the aggravating factors greatly outweigh mitigating circumstances. Given the facts of the case, nothing in defendant's background or mental state would suggest that a death sentence is inappropriate. This court's review of other reported capital cases has led the court to conclude that the death penalty is not disproportionate in this case. Under the totality of the circumstances and evidence, the court finds no basis to override the jury's verdict. The totality of the circumstances warrants that the defendant, Wade Stephen Wilson, be sentenced to death for each count of first-degree murder. Accordingly, it is ordered and adjudged that the defendant, Wade Stephen Wilson, be sentenced as follows. Count 1, first-degree murder of Christine Melton. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Count 2, grand theft of a motor vehicle. The defendant is sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in the Florida Department of Corrections. Count 3, battery. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 364 days in the Lee County Jail. Count 4, first-degree murder of Diane Ruiz. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Count 5, the burglary of a dwelling. Defendant is hereby sentenced to 15 years imprisonment in the Florida Department of Corrections. Count 6, petty theft. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 364 days in Lee County Jail. The defendant is given credit for all time served on this case on all counts. All counts are to run concurrent with each other, meaning at the same time. All statutorily mandated fines, fees, and costs as announced on the record are imposed, and the defendant is committed to the custody of the Department of Corrections for execution of this sentence as provided by law. The defendant is hereby notified that these convictions and sentences are subject to automatic review by the Florida Supreme Court. If he cannot afford an attorney to represent him in any appeal, the court will appoint one for him. Are there any other matters to present to the court?
Briefly, Judge, the state would be seeking $17,500 cost of prosecution.
I'm sorry, how much?
$17,500, Judge.
All right. Any objection?
No, sir.
All right. That will be imposed then. Any other terms or conditions?
Absolutely, Judge. We just want to make sure that Mr. Wilson has absolutely no contact with the victim's family in this particular.
There'll be no contact ordered with any of the victim's family members and anything else.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Judge, I understand he has other cases pending here and elsewhere. Mr. Wilson asked me to ask the court within whatever authority you have to get him to death row as soon as possible.
Okay. Well, in relation to those other cases, I know we have cases pending here in the circuit. Today is not the day to handle those. I would maybe put those, I could do it as early as September 16th. I believe that's Monday morning.
That's Malcolm's case, Judge.
Yes, Your Honor. Malcolm Down from Mr. Wade Wilson. September 16th would be fine.
Okay. Well, I think it'd be more appropriate to handle that at a different time. So let's do that September 16th then at 9 a.m. for the other cases, which are case numbers
20 CF 16591 and 23 CF 15499.
Okay. And we have court on the 16th, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Judge, if I may, he also has a VOP warrant out of Broward County, Palm Beach County. I'm going to get in touch with the authorities over there, but if need be, we'll ask the court to ROR him on that VOP warrant so he can be taken up to
Well, it's not a motion in front of me today, but if you certainly be able to file whatever you want to file, and
Yes, sir.
I'll consider it.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Not from the state, Judge.
All right, sir. Then, Mr. Wilson, you will be fingerprinted and remanded to the Sheriff's Department. You'll be held without bond and for transport to the Department of Corrections when it's appropriate. If nothing else, then we're adjourned. And I'll give you your copies. Original. Mr. Shirley or Mr. Hollander? Well, one for the state, one for the defense. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Inside a quiet Florida courtroom, the state laid out one of the most disturbing sequences of crimes the judge had ever reviewed. Wilson wasn't an unknown face. He had already drawn online attention, but what mattered here was not notoriety. It was evidence, precise, documented, and devastating. The judge's task was to evaluate the full picture. 2 murders separated by mere hours, both committed while Wilson was still on probation for earlier felonies. What emerged was a chilling pattern of escalation, rapid, ruthless, and undeniably intentional. The chain of violence began at the home of Christine Melton. According to the court's findings, Wilson entered her residence with premeditation. What happened inside was brutal. He beat and strangled her, ending her life in the very place she should have been safest. After killing her, he took her car, later charged as grand theft of a motor vehicle, and fled the scene, beginning a trajectory that would only lead to greater violence. His next stop was to meet his girlfriend, Melissa Mons. When she refused to get into the stolen car, Wilson lashed out, battering her in broad daylight. She managed to escape, and Wilson sped away again, this time heading back toward Cape Coral. And somewhere on that drive, he made a decision the court described as cold and calculated. He would kill again. That decision unfolded when Wilson saw Diane Ruiz walking to work. He pulled over, pretending to need directions. It was a small act of kindness from her, getting into the car to help. But the moment she tried to get out, Wilson grabbed her. He strangled her, then drove to an empty lot, where he strangled her again, long enough for her to lose consciousness. But the most chilling moment was still ahead. When Miss Ruiz managed to get out of the vehicle, fighting for her life, Wilson ran her over, causing catastrophic injuries to her ribs, spine, and neck. The judge later described this second murder as heinous, atrocious, and cruel, committed with full awareness and deliberate intent. 2 women. 2 lives taken with alarming speed and extreme violence. During sentencing, Wilson's defense offered background details the court considered as non-statutory mitigators: early drug exposure, feelings of abandonment, untreated mental health struggles, and a loving adoptive family. He also confessed fully after his arrest. But the judge wrote clearly, the aggravating factors far outweighed anything presented in mitigation. Wilson committed 2 separate premeditated murders. Both involved extreme cruelty, and both occurred during active probation. The jury's recommendation reflected that gravity, a 9-3 vote for death in the murder of Christine Melton, and 10-2 for the murder of Diane Ruiz. And so the court followed the advisory verdict. For the murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, the judge sentenced Wade Stephen Wilson to death. Additional prison terms were imposed for the related felonies, including burglary. And as required by law, the sentence now moves to automatic review by the Florida Supreme Court. 2 families lost someone they loved. A community faced the aftermath of senseless violence, and the justice system delivered its final irreversible answer. If you want more deep, fact-based breakdowns of courtroom outcomes like this, subscribe for future episodes, and tell us in the comments which case you want covered next.